This is the drone mapping webinar for ground and aerial measurements. Today is February 5th, 2019, and we're going to get started here. My name is Paul Adkins. I am the moderator today. I'm actually with Laser Technology. And if anything, I want to just at least encourage everybody who's just joined to please interact with us. This is the whole purpose of an actual live webinar versus watching something recorded. So as content comes up or any questions or comments that you have, we absolutely encourage you to please use that chat feature. And the way it works is you just kind of roll your mouse over your main screen. You should see a little chat icon that pops up. Click on that, and then you should see it appear over to the right. If you send your chat to all panelists, that actually we give everybody a chance to see your questions. If not, I am at least going to see it at the bare minimum as the moderator, and we should be good to go. So on the second slide here, we just wanted to remind everybody that we do have this webinar filed with the ACTAR organization, so you can apply for one continuing education credit. And at the end, what we'll try to do is potentially do a poll. If not, we'll just assume that you want a certificate, and we'll actually have something emailed to you. So I'll go in that a little bit more detail at the end, but I do want to let everyone know that this webinar does apply for that. And then we are going to go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, just to talk about just today's objectives, we're certainly going to learn about just drone operation in general for crash, crime, or fire mapping applications. The guest speakers will be addressing, just some hardware options of what's available out there, talk about some flight plans and photographic techniques, and then certainly address the regulations and certifications for both the United States and Canada. And just some software options and just, kind of some high-level processing steps for rendering the data that you do collect. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just have each speaker introduce themselves. Go ahead and start with you, Mike.
Hi, this is Mike Allard. Still one of the people on the job in law enforcement, and I specialize in collision reconstruction and crime scene reconstruction, as well as Federal Zone instruction.
Perfect. Dave?
Yes, hey, good morning. Thank you very much for everyone for showing up. My name's Dave Rineholt. I'm a retired Maryland State Trooper. Had a little over 22 years in law enforcement. Been active in the reconstruction program since about 1991 and conduct a lot of forensic mapping training classes with total station lasers, things of that nature. That's my background.
Perfect. Hey, Matt?
Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Name's Matt Hewko. I'm from the Canadian side of the border. I'm here to provide our insight in what we do for today's topics. And I've put in 15 years in law enforcement, the last 10 in traffic safety, and then went to the private sector to make sure that everyone can have all the training and knowledge to make them better.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right into the agenda today. I think go ahead and transition to the slides. And Mike, take it away.
Yeah, we're going to start talking about some of the popular drones. I specialize in DJI, and I know Maddie, does Arion. Maddie, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Arion Labs here in Canada, they're pretty big, but they're also going through a state of transition. They were just purchased by FLIR. So look out for the news for that to see what's coming out of there. But anyways, their drones are very big when it comes to extreme usage and extreme temperatures, higher winds and higher temperatures and lower temperatures. So up here, that's kind of a big thing for us.
Yeah, and Dave, you said you were using the Uniques with some students?
Yeah, I just recently was working with a department in Maryland that actually had the unique craft as a industrial style craft to meet service their needs as a public safety department. And it, at least by specs, appears to be a very ruggedized craft and was well suited for their needs, not only for forensic mapping of incident scenes, but for other public safety needs like search and rescue, things of that nature, and crime scenes.
Yeah, I primarily use my DJIs with the LTI lasers. I know, Dave, you're into GPS and total stations as well as you, Matt.
Yep, that's true.
Some other things we're going to talk about is what's the initial equipment cost? What do you have for maintenance plans? And that's different between us in the U.S. and Matty up in Canada. And then some possible training. Next slide.
Yes, well, one of the topics we wanted to look at here is when we're integrating aerial data, that what type of flight patterns can you set forth to pre-plan a mapping of an incident scene, regardless if it's a motor vehicle collision or some type of outdoor crime scene. And what's very interesting, I find how much supporting software that is out there, that if you're not up to speed yet to fly free flight or fly by stick, that a lot of the software companies have apps out there currently that will help guide you through to pre-plan a mission, depending upon ultimately what data you're looking to harvest from that mission, 2D or 3D. And kind of boil down to about three groups. The first one that's listed there is a grid pattern, or sometimes referred to as a corridor. It's almost like a farmer plowing through a field where the area is being covered through a path that's preset by maybe the autonomous flight capabilities of the app that you may be utilizing, or you're conducting it, flying it by stick, where you're looking to harvest out some type of 2D data of a map output. Most often than not, it's an orthomosaic TIFF file. So you're flying a mission that's rectangular through a corridor, and the nadir images, otherwise they're vertical, straight down, that you're collecting images as you are proceeding through the grid pattern. Again, without getting into it heavily, most of the software, either the software that you're utilizing to conduct your flight, or it's one of those things sometimes, is it the horse before the cart or the cart before the horse? I think the more you learn about your post-processing software, otherwise the photogrammetry software that you may be utilizing, and again, that will be covered a little bit later on, but whether it's Eyewitness Pro, Photo Modeler, Pix4D, or some of the other web-based ones, that a lot of times you'll get a better understanding of what data you need to collect when it comes to the photographic information and the type of overlap, not only longitudinally, but laterally, that will best serve you to get an output that will meet your needs. Another flight pattern that's out there, it's utilized quite often, is like a double grid, where you're actually, it's almost like two grid missions at one at a 90-degree angle. It is flown where you're looking to get some good vertical data potentially. So your camera may not be an ortho value, otherwise 90 degrees, will have some oblique angle. And ultimately, with the end product, through some type of post-processing, again, through a photogrammetry program, you're looking to get 3D data. So you may want to work with a mesh, or most often than not, a point cloud data that you're going to be able to harvest out a LAS file and take it into some of the forensic CAD programs. That's one thing that came about, I guess, a lot by the introduction of 3D laser scanners, that a lot of the forensic CAD programs out there, ranging from Farazone to IMS Map to some to Reveal, and some even the Carlson software, that they've had point cloud engines brought into them, so you can start conducting a virtual survey, otherwise harvest 3D data points within those applications. So potentially you can be getting some, not only XYZ data, but also vertical data being harvested from that. Another unique flight pattern is a circular that's out there. It's good for a 3D output. It gets a lot of good vertical data. Even though there's an example there of a cellular radio tower that's being documented by orbital paths at various altitudes to carry all the data. But that type of pattern could be utilized very easily for documenting an intersection, or if you wanted to document a vehicle that maybe they have a good workaround space at an impound lot, that you can develop aerial photographs in a circular pattern, and again, to get a point cloud of some density out of there for measurements if necessary. last but not least, really, and again, it's not really a pattern per se, it's the ability to fly by stick or free flight, where because of special needs or to capture some unique data because of the environment that you're in, where you may want to completely fly, by stick, where you're collecting the photographs, where you're looking to, get your good longitudinal or lateral overlap to make sure that you can get a successful post-processing, though it doesn't have to be independent of a preset pattern, otherwise a grid or a double grid, so you can combine that with the data between two different jobs or same flight, where you're getting data from various altitudes, various different positions to ensure that you're getting good quality information to work with, depending upon where you want to go with this data ultimately. Anything from orthomosaic TIFF files that have been rectified and come into scale into a application, or again working with the point cloud where you get the XYZ, also the RGB values from the photographs, and to plot virtual survey data to create an environment within a CAD program or a simulation program where you're able to render an animation on the surface of the point cloud.
Hey, Dave, I actually have a question that's come through, if we could address that, and again, any of the panelists can answer this, but is asking about, is there a recommended distance for the overlap in the grids?
That's each software kind of has its own suggestion of what they're asking for. Most often, I'm seeing somewhere of a longitudinal overlap of anywhere from 70 to about 80%, and a lateral overlap of around 65 to 70%. So that's why I mentioned earlier that sometimes you need, various flight applications give you some suggestions how to work with it. And again, there's the science behind photogrammetry, and then there's the art. The art is ultimately, looking at your environment, what needs to be covered, and how many photographs you're going to be able to collect. So beginning off, a lot of times, that's why some of the autonomous flight programs for grids and double grids help assist you work through that, because there are preset values. And again, a lot of the photogrammetry programs will guide you what they're looking for to successfully process it through their programs, and so that can help guide you with when you fly by stick or any of the presets that's available.
Great, thanks, Dave. I also have another question here asking kind of about the previous slide. Has anybody done any tests, like as far as the time and cost between aerial versus total station versus scanner? You guys have any input on that?
This is Dave. I will tell you that the paper is a couple of years old, but I found it very interesting. I actually think it was done by North Carolina DOT. It was during their governor's highway safety campaign kickoff, where there was an entity there conducting controlled crash testing, and so since they already had that environment set up, they used a skilled team that I know they deployed a 3D laser scanner, and then they also conducted it with a drone. And they had some good information, not only with the on-seat time to capture the data, but also the back end, the post-processing at the office, to ultimately come up with some times that when it comes to efficiency and things of that nature. So that's one paper that I'm sure there are other comparisons out there.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that you also have to take the weather into consideration. So there's times that you're going to be using your total station, you won't be able to use the drone.
Yeah, unfortunately, with a lot of traffic stuff, there really isn't one be-all, end-all solution when it comes to everything. You got to figure it out as a toolbox, and it's all the tools that you have inside. You have your drones, you have your total stations, you have your robots, you have your scanners, you have your handhelds, you have your cameras. So depending on what is presented to you at your scene or during your investigation, you have to see what is most applicable. Obviously, the more tools you do for the job, the better output you're going to get, because you have all that data and that information to input for your final project or for your final report. But sometimes it just dictates it's just too dark in the middle of nowhere. You can't fly a drone. There's no ambient lighting, and the lights that you have from your local fire department or anything isn't just helping out. So it all depends on the scenario, really. But the more tools you have, the versatility is there for you to have a more thorough investigation.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, guys. We'll get through some more of the techniques now.
Yeah, the photo techniques are really much tied into the type of mission that you're flying and ultimately the type of data that you're looking to harvest. So top-down are nadir images that will ultimately serve to get you a 2D output for an ortho mosaic. You will need good high overlap to ensure greater accuracy for your mapping output. Again, a lot of the software kind of guides you on the mission that you're flying and the data output that you're getting. So for top-down, you'll have the flight style, many times a grid or a polygon, so some type of irregular shape feature. And again, with your free flight, where you're flying by stick, where you're supplementing or you're conducting the whole flight by the actual controls of the device. Oblique angles, again, is just another photo technique that's incorporated with a lot of the grid patterns. It's good for very good vertical data for 3D output for point clouds. Again, your flight styles will be depending upon that, where you're running a grid or some type of orbital or circular pattern, or even free flight. Again, it's because you're capturing photographs maybe from multiple different angles that you're getting very good vertical data for your z-axis, and so changes of elevation, heights, and things of that nature. Terrestrial, again, nothing says that you can't. A lot of the photogrammetry software allows you to bring in photographs that were captured in different methodologies. So if you have a handheld camera or a pole-mounted camera of some type where you're, say, documenting a vehicle at a tow yard where maybe you conducted an initial flight of a circular pattern or orbital pattern around it at different altitudes, that you can additionally supplement that with another camera that's handheld that with or without GPS, and on a pole mount to get some good vertical angles, and to integrate those with with your drone data that came from an aerial flight. What comes up a lot of times too when it comes to accuracy or you better fine tune, again, is something where you'll see a lot of literature out there referred to as control points in the world of forensic mapping and with drones and aerial flights. Those the geotags that come from the crafts that you're flying, whether it's DJI or anything else out there, they are consumer-grade GPS, so they are good, but are not necessarily highly accurate. They can have noise of errors of about 1 millimeter that can be brought about, or some geo shift, otherwise synchronization between when there's a reading of the GPS and actual photograph is taken. You'll see that the XY, when you get very good overlap in your nadir images, so your two-dimensional scale diagrams coming in extremely well, that Z many times is what falls a little bit behind. If you're looking to work in a 3D environment where you're looking to harvest 3D data points from a point cloud, those are times where you may need to introduce ground control points. What ground control points are it can be physical features on the roadway, maybe like manhole covers, storm drains, or things that you interject into the scene, otherwise designed for aerial targets, so like checkerboards, or mats that have high contrasting colors, or even one of the courses I went through even looked at like some soccer cones that you can place. You place them randomly throughout your scene. Most from the photogrammetry softwares will ask you, to place about 5 to 8, but not to over-inundate with control points for potentially overloading the algorithms to work through a solution. But they're randomly placed out into maybe the four corners, but not to the far extreme of the corners, and maybe something in the center. And then with some type of laser measuring device, either an LTI system or electronic toll station, or if you have a GPS where you are physically measuring those points. And then what occurs is those points are then brought into the photogrammetry software, and you are able to designate those measurements with specific targets, and that helps the software to more accurately scale the data based upon those ground control points. Again, you want them highly visible, captured in multiple photographs, and importantly too, if you're sometimes where you're really concerned of the level of accuracy, that if you have a point of interest, and maybe a gouge mark that's in the area of impact, or you have a significant maybe change of elevation, placing a couple at the high end or the low end. So all those are worked into the solution when it comes to scaling of the point cloud data, and also will assist with the scaling of the XY data when it comes to an orthomosaic TIFF file.
Yeah, Paul, if I may, I just want to add one thing. I deal with a lot of smaller departments, and really they're interested in taking one aerial image and bringing that in with their measurements. And I did see a couple chats come across with, what could we use for control points? And I think, Dave, you'll probably agree with this, but you don't really want to use a control point that's too high because you'll get a perspective issue. Would you like to get into that?
Well, I mean, when you want your control points, again, they're physical features or targets that you've placed that I know they're well dispersed, and that you can measure them with a system, again with a toll station or some type of GPS, or again ultimately that they're captured in multiple photographs, and that again it's just the program to scale the data beyond any geotagging. I mean, because that's the interesting thing. You can in fact use photographs that are not, geotagged. GPS data is not really needed to create the 3D image. The geotags that come from the craft are help with the scaling, the orientation, and then really if you're using GPS control points, then it's actually giving you a good position relative to, maybe your state coordinate system, maybe that you're tying it into real-world location.
We do have a couple other questions. It seems like from what I know in the material, we might be addressing those. So I'd say let's move on to the next subject matter, and then we can certainly address some of those if they're not answered here coming up.
Okay, so in regards for Transport Canada, for any Canadians out there, obviously you've heard some of the information coming out that as of June 1st of this year, new rules and regulations will be enacted, and that's where we're going further ahead. So right now we have our current rules in play. I would recommend that if you are in the market of getting a remote piloted aircraft system, which is the new UAV terminology. It's the new terminology is coming out just because it's getting into international compliance and compatibility. So you'll see RPAS not only here, but you'll see it in Europe and other places of the world where all these systems are coming in play on a global scale. So anyways, if you are thinking about it, I would recommend waiting till June 1st or getting your licenses and everything that are coming into effect for the June 1st, just for the fact that we have current rules now. So you're just to save yourself some time and energy, you're not going through the current system. And by the time that happens, June 1st rolls around, and then now you're starting almost from scratch. So, but if you are planning on doing that, there's still a lot of things that you can do for those new changes that come in effect. So right now, you need a special flight operations certificate, or a SFOC, and that's for anything over 25 kilograms, or roughly, or just a little over 55 pounds. And this, under the current rules, it tells you how and where you can fly. And regardless of the current rules or the new rules, you'll still need one of those. Depending on, in the new rules coming up, depending on what you're flying and how you're flying it. Obviously, there's requirements. It's highly recommended that you go to a flight school, a drone flight school, for a specific training. And then obviously, if you're going to get into the class where the special flight operations certificate applies, then you'll have to go through that application process. So essentially the big changes are terminology, and then not only will you have a SFOC if you fall into that, but you have a basic and advanced pilot certificate. So you'll have a pilot certificate in a sense where for basic operations, if you are flying in an uncontrolled airspace where there's no air traffic control that is provided, and you're at least 30 meters or more away from bystanders, then you just need a pilot certificate, basic operations license. But if you're going to fly within 30 meters and over people within controlled airspace with approval, then you'll need the advanced operations for the pilot certificate. Now, again, this is for the new regs that are coming out in June 1st in Canada, issued by Transport Canada. And then anything beyond that, any drone over 25 kilograms, and you're flying your drone over advertised events or large crowds, and you're within an airport and you're flying above 122 meters or roughly 400 feet, then you're going to have to apply for an SFOC. So those are kind of the three categories that Transport Canada is implementing as of June 1st. So at the bottom of this slide here, you have your references for your current and new regs. Just review that before you engage any of your commercial use for your items. I know for police services, there will be exceptions, but none are listed. And as like old with new, is there going to be any grandfathering? They have not mentioned any grandfathering. However, if you have standing SFOCs, standing meaning that you've been in the business or you've been commercially around, and you've called enough airports, and you've done your business for a wide range of time, and you have a good reputation on flying safely and appropriately, then I'm sure they'll take that in consideration with the new rules and regs as they come out.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Hey, Mike, before we dive into the FAA, let's go ahead and address some of these questions just regarding the control points. I did see kind of a slew of them come in. So just before we jump again to the FAA stuff, if I can ask a couple questions here on behalf of the audience. One question is it possible to use a FLIR camera for this process at night?
Well, the only issue that you're going to have with FLIR is your heat, right? So if that's a big thing, because especially at night, you have warm ground cooling off, and that temperature is always changing as you're flying the scene. So unless you have a constant heat source, you're going to have some issues, because that big dot might show up at the beginning of your scene, and it'll be a little small speck at the end of your scene. And if you're still flying that and pulling that into any processing software, you're going to have issues where that software might not recognize the change in the difference from the beginning to the end of the flight.
Yeah, I mean, if you're flying FLIR in the daytime versus the nighttime, but there's some nighttime issues that we'll talk about in a little while anyways.
Perfect. A couple other questions again here. Do you have to enter an elevation for your ground control points?
Well, if you look to fine-tune the data with ground control points, then again, you're either acquiring those measurements with a GPS system, or working with a local coordinate information, like a total station system of some type, where you're taking the XYZ data and from the mapping of those control points with the total station and utilizing them as a local coordinate, and is assigning those elevational and XYZ data to basically calibrate the point cloud in the processing of the also the orthomosaic image. So it's utilizing any change of elevational data that you're collecting from the mapping during your total station operation.
Yeah, I would agree. You're talking multi-sensor documentation, and if you're going to be using a GPS to record your control points and importing into a point cloud file, you're going to want the elevation alignment.
Another question here, is it better to for all control points to be the same or use different colors, et cetera, for each, or does it matter?
Well, when it comes to the software, it doesn't matter. It's all about visibility, how well you can distinguish various targets. So if you have the capability to have targets that have some type of either number or letter designation, or you want to use color-coded targets, it is something that ultimately, it's your mission. You're going to be ultimately doing the post-processing. So the ability to keep track of those targets, it's not a bad thing. Maybe they have a different colored targets or targets that are numbered or lettered to help better distinguish them when you are selecting them in the the program of your choice to bring those control points into your project. All right.
Thanks, guys. I think that addresses most of the questions. I hope everyone else feels satisfied with that. If not, you can always repost a question if it's critical and important to you, or save it to the end as well. So, Mike, let's go ahead and talk about the FAA regulations.
Yeah, what you're going to want to do is familiar yourself with FAA Part 107, and one of the questions I always get from my students is, do I really need to get a commercial license? And the commercial license is based on any compensation for you or the benefits of another business. And generally, I would tell people, if you're getting paid to fly, get the license. Now, in addition, if you're working for government, you're probably going to be getting a certificate of authorization waiver, or a COA. And you're going to be getting insurance for your flights, and that insurance is going to predicate whether you have a pilot's license. Now, in order to get the pilot's license, you're going to have to go to an FAA center and take the Part 107 written exam. I'm a licensed pilot as well, so I can tell you that this test you take is pretty close to the ground school that you're going to take for a regular license, and it's from the actual manual. And I always get people to ask me, well, why do I have to take a test that's so close to a regular pilot's license ground school? If you remember, we're putting a registered aircraft into the sky, and we have to learn about weather, we have to learn about airspace, we have to learn about limitations, and I think it's really beneficial to somebody to get a license, no matter what anyways. The license is 60 questions, and it takes generally about 2 hours. I know at my PD we have 6 licensed pilots, and every single one of them has taken that test. Go ahead to the next slide. You're going to want to look at the Part 107 operational rules, and I just had a couple of rules put in there, and I always get, well, can I fly over people? Can I fly over that active scene? And realistically, you can't fly over any people that aren't directly participating in the operation of the flight. So who constitutes a participating party? I would say generally that's going to be your visual observer, your pilot in command, and your person manipulating the controls of the flight. The person flying the drone does not have to have a license so long as the pilot in command is in control of that drone, is right there with that pilot, and he does have a license. And you'll learn a lot of things about the pilot and commander PIC. One of the other rules that I thought was specific to put in there was you must maintain visual line of sight on the aircraft at all times. So if you have a large scene and you're flying a scan, you might want to set up multiple start locations to maintain control of that. I know in our area, we have the military helicopters, we have light flight helicopters, and you really don't want to put a danger in way of anybody flying. And generally, the helicopters are going to be pretty close to our 400-foot elevation regulation. If you want to go to the next slide, I did see a question come across this. You're going to have to learn what are the restricted and prohibited areas. And I saw one flag that said they have a large airport near their jurisdiction. If you get a certification of waiver or a COA, in your COA application to the FAA, you can put the airspace that you're near, and you'll be granted the ability to call ATC, or air traffic control. And I know that there's a lot of departments that are near Class C and Class B airspace that are dealing with this right now. If you're near a smaller airport, like a Class G airport, you still have to make notification to the airport and get authorization to fly in their airspace. A general rule is if you're within 5 miles of an airport, you're going to want to look at some type of contact and authorization.
Hey guys, before we jump into the software, there are some other questions I'd like to get addressed that came through. Mike, thanks for that content there. One of the questions is, I'm new to using a drone for mapping an accident or crime scene. I'm not new to drones using already Part 107 certified. Is there anything else I need to fly for purposes of using drone or for police accident reconstruction?
I think your first guideline is if you're operating within the Part 107 regulations and you have your commercial license, you're going to be fine. You're going to be held to the 400-foot ceiling. You're going to be held to no flying at night, no flying over people, all the same regulations that restrict a general user. If you're going to need, let's say your department got FLIR and you're going to have to fly at night for suspect searches, you're going to have to get a waiver from the FAA to authorize you to do that. I hope that helps that question.
Great, thanks, Mike. Another question came through, question about the COA. We currently have 4 Part 107 licensed pilots, but our commander would like us to get a COA. Is this something we should even explore?
You know, I always tell people it's only as hard as you make it, and I can supply users with a copy of our departmental COA information. The COAs are public information, and you can actually Google search them and see how other agencies set up their application. I would say if you're going to apply for a COA, which is basically an application, be as detailed as you can. Put in, you know, very detailed information about what is your service area. Very detailed information about your drone, very detailed information about your lost link procedures, your flyaway procedures. I think it almost makes you a better pilot when you go through that application process.
This is Dave. Let me interject here something real quick. What I've realized working with a lot of different departments that each department is unique potentially what their needs are in the areas that they look to fly, their airspace. And as such, you know, whether it's under a COA or underneath the Part 107 or a combination of both, many times comes down to their specific needs. Not all departments, you know, even though you may have a neighboring jurisdiction, their needs may be different, or certain areas that they're flying may be different to yours. There are a lot of good consulting entities that are out there that have fine-tuned to get to the needs of public safety. So you're looking to fly as forensic mapping to document crash and crime scenes, or you're looking to deploy your crafts for search and rescue, or you're looking for other public safety search and warrants. There are consulting companies out there that can really sit down, look at your department's needs, and really guide you through putting a program in place that really meets the needs of your community that you're serving, and then also ensures the credibility of your program when it comes to COAs, 107s, and things of that nature. So there are a lot of resources out there from professional consulting entities specific for law enforcement. So any department that's really looking, not to say you should maybe search or talk to your neighboring jurisdiction to see how they initially got going, but again, when it comes to agency rules and regs, policies, there are a lot of good consulting companies out there that can help, walk you through this process to ensure that, all the safeguards are in place and your needs are met.
Great, thanks, Dave. Another question came through, guys. Does flying over people, in quotes, include flying over people in cars, meaning can I fly over an intersection with traffic?
You're not supposed to be flying over moving vehicles. If we have an accident scene, that scene should be pretty sterile.
Okay. Another question came through. I had heard that the FAA was going to implement a system where people can get instant approval for airspace based on web-based program, considering that they are licensed in some manner with 107 or COA. Do you know if that is true? Have you guys heard of anything like that?
There is talk.
Stuart, I apologize. This is Dave here. Yeah, there is by the FAA a program called LANCE that has been designated out to a lot of different companies out there that have software apps, and it's designed that it allows you to create an account, and as they refer to, is to gain near real-time authorization to fly in controlled airspace that you need to get authorization from. Though you'll find a lot of airports are not a part of that system, and I'm based here in Maryland, and none of the airports here in Maryland are a part of the LAND system. So as a Part 107 pilot, I have to go to the FAA web portal. There is actually designed a portal by which you can log on, if you have an account, and you actually make your application online for, an authorization to fly in controlled airspace. I was pleasantly surprised here recently. I had to make an application to get authorization to fly in a Class D airspace at the far extremes where the ceiling was 400 feet, and I submitted my request online actually during the time frame of the partial government shutdown, and within 13 days I gained my authorization to fly in the controlled airspace, naturally with the limitations I set forth and what also they set forth in the authorization. So yes, there is a program out like that. There are certain programs out there, apps that have the ability to tie into that. If not, there is a web portal also that you apply to get your authorization.
Yeah, and that authorization could take up to 90.
Yeah, they post at 90 days. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't really a complex request for authorization, and like I said, turnaround time was 13 days.
Great. Let's go ahead and jump into some of these software options, guys, and kind of go into the post-processing processes that you guys go through.
Matty, you want to start with Pix4D?
Sure. Up here in Canada, especially in Ontario, we've been very active with Pix4D software, and it's proven quite well. The software is fantastic. Unfortunately, and I say this as an unfortunate, but it applies to everyone. Everyone in anything that you do. So you just have to be careful depending on what you're using it for versus like reconstructionists versus engineers versus surveyors or anything like that. You really have to pull out the semantics out of the training for that as well as the vocabulary to really sit down and look at this software. It's fantastic. It's from Switzerland, great support. But the thing is you just have to be aware, and I'm seeing all the other softwares as well. Lots of a multitude of applications to a lot of industries. You just have to be careful what settings you're using as well as what you're going to be using that software for. So, for example, like someone asked before for photograph overlay. Well, Pix4Ds might be different from Photo Modeler, so you have to be aware how you're going to fly those grid patterns and what percentage you're going to get for the side overlap as well as the front and back or the frontal overlap of those photos. Because if you're not flying to what the software requires, you're going to have a pretty poor final product. So this is where Dave was saying you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. If you know what software you're using and you know the settings on how good to get a good quality report or final product, then you're going to fly your device according to your software so you can maximize A, your efficiency, and B, the quality of your report at the end.
Yeah, and generally, what is Pix4D costing an agency?
Ooh, US, you're looking at about $10,000 for the perpetual, or about $400 per month for your rental.
Yeah, I've used Drone Deploy. Drone Deploy is averaging about $1,000 a year for the subscription, and I just probably about a year ago started playing around with Precision Mapper, which offers a free service where you can do 5 scans a month. It's, like you said, you definitely have to pay attention to your overlap for your accuracy, though. So know the limitations of the software that you're using. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not only you get what you pay for, but you also need to know what best suits your jurisdiction's protocols. Because if you know that you're throwing a bird in the air for 2 crashes a month, and if you want to save some money, Precision Mapper would be the way to go. But you also have to know what else it can provide you in the long run, especially for court purposes too.
Guys, we do have some comments here just real quick. Some of the audience here, they say they use Autodesk Recap and also Reality Capture from Capturing Reality or Realty. It's great for lower cost and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to share that with the crowd if they didn't see it already. But Matt, go ahead and talk about the data rendering process.
So in the generic outline, you put up your drone or your RPAS, whatever you're using. You capture that data. You capture your scene. You capture whatever you're doing, and then from there you take those photos, and then you're going to go back to the office. You're going to put them into a third-party image processing software, like the last slide we just had up. Your photo modelers, your Pix4Ds, whatever, and then from there. Aside from doing a good presentation or a good rendering to show clients or the court or whatever like that, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty portion of scaling, drawing, and additional overlays of items such as bringing in your total station data or your at-scene data with your photos taken by GPS, like the multi-sensored processing, then you're going to transfer that final image or that final product, like an LAS from your third-party software, and then you're going to import that into your drawing software. So a few that come to mind is Ferrozone, like Mike mentioned earlier, and IMS Map 360 from Microsurvey. And then that's where you can start drawing lines or doing all your specific measurements that way if you want to post-process beyond the imaging process portion of your overall processing part of your data rendering. So it's essentially three components. You have your flight data, you put in your image processing, and then that's where your flight data has to be very, very well put together, because if you know your software, you know how to fly it, and then you know the data that you need to obtain to get a good image overall, and then from there you can have a good crisp drawing if you need to scale and put lines to whatever you have.
I mean, over the last couple of years, a lot of the forensic CAD companies, again, whether it's a Tremble Reveal or the IMS Map 360 or used to be Map Scenes, or, from CAD Zone to Ferrozone, they're 3D advanced. A lot of them have realized there's a need to have a point cloud engine. So they're utilizing a file format, either LAS and LAZ, that's bringing in the XYZ data along with the RGB, otherwise the real-time color coding of those data points to allow you to bring them into these programs and to conduct a virtual survey. Otherwise, you're able to establish a coordinate system and then able to select points. And then since the points, if you're working with the point cloud is 3D, you can build a coordinate data table of XYZ and then apply the descriptors of those points that you're selecting, as if you were mapping with some type of EVR software from a total station, and then allow the CAD program to do the line cutting activity if you want, and then, as if, and continue to map and diagram no differently than you were working with a total station data. Again, one of the other outputs of most of these photogrammetry programs is an orthorectify mosaic TIFF file. That there's a companion real-world scale file that these programs can basically bring that TIFF file in, and there's no additional scaling necessary if it was properly documented and mapped out, that these images will come in to scale. And again, you can you conduct a virtual survey, draft your lines, your points, and use them as an underlay, as opposed to a Google Earth image that may not have the clarity or the point of view that you want, that you're getting from your own mapping and diagramming.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to expand on that there, Dave, this diagram here, like, you can also go straight from flight data to your drawing software. This is a generic, this is if you're doing from A to Z or Z in regards to from flight to processing to output to court, this is your general kind of flow of what you're going to be doing. But a lot of services or police departments that are out there, they just want to throw up a drone and take a couple overall shots and then pull it down. So even with that, you can take that one individual picture, just a top-down nadir, and import that into your drawing software, and you can draw your lines into that. So, and then you can even throw on. Yeah.
A lot of departments, they'll put their craft up and take an aerial nadir shot, maybe one or two at the same altitude, get a little bit of overlap. There is a very nice free program out there by Microsoft. It's called Microsoft ICE, ICE. It's available to this day from them, and it is a stitching program. It allows you to stitch multiple photographs together. So again, you have the capabilities to not only take a single shot, but maybe take one or two if you need to give a larger intersection, and it will stitch them together. And then ultimately you can bring them in as an image into most of these forensic CAD programs, and most of them have the capabilities that if two points of real world, maybe two measured with a steel tape, maybe like from a manhole cover to a storm drain, something that is visible in your diagram, then these programs will allow you to scale those images based upon those 2 points, and again, to better give you a more accurate, if you're drafting, lines, maybe pulling measurements or placing vehicles. So there's no other, maybe other third-party post-processing through a photogrammetry program. You can either bring the single image in or even stitch them through this Microsoft ICE, where you have the capabilities to, again, for free, to put the images together and bring them into your CAD program.
So, guys, I know we have a couple more slides just to get through as far as the content, and certainly want to leave some time open for questions as well. So, maybe you can kind of finish out a couple of your last slides here. And then I do want to poll everybody. I do have the poll ready. So once we're done with the content, I'm just going to poll everyone to see who is interested in wanting to receive their certification of completion for this webinar for the ACTAR credit. So, Matt, I think you had a couple more slides here to finish up first.
Yeah, sure. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so when it comes to stitching the pictures together, 9 out of 10 times your software is doing that. But at the same time, you want to make sure, like, when you're going into a scene and you're flying a drone and you know what software you have, you just got to make sure, what are you using it for? Am I just putting it up there for a couple pictures, for a two-dimensional, for a visual, or am I going to be doing a 3D rendering from beginning to end because this is, a big bad crime scene or whatever? So you need to know what you're going to do at the back end to know what you're doing at the front end, if that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, you also have to have the equipment. Flying a drone is one thing, but at the same time, you want to have a camera that can produce those pictures that are high in quality. So generally speaking, anything that's 12 megapixel or higher is a relatively good camera, because if you really think about it, people are craving 4K imagery and everything for video. Well, if you think about it, that's about 8 to 10 megapixels when you're looking at 4K video. So you got to be cautious on what camera you have, because they might sell you on the 4K, but that camera might come back and be a lower megapixel. So if you're just using a camera for visuals, 12 or higher is best. Also, along with ground control points, like Dave mentioned, you can also have landmarks. So even if you're not in the traffic world of things and you're at a crime scene, and you have just a couple of pictures of a property or a house or whatever, but those pictures have, let's say, a hydrant and a sewer, or there's a defining walkway or a path or something, that's fine. You can use that. Go back to it after, do a physical measurement or a hard tape, and then you can bring that into your software. So that all ties with your images and how good in quality they are. But drone is one thing. It's just a platform to hold your camera. So if your drone isn't that good to hold your camera, then you're not going to get some good pictures. Just like if you're holding a camera with your hands and your hands are shaky, you're going to get blurry imagery. And you also have to worry about any under or overexposure as well, right? So with some of the softwares that are out there, it'll tell you what cameras they recommend that are compatible with their own individual software. So you just got to be aware of that as well, because that's what we're doing. This is photogrammetry. This is all about taking pictures, and then you can scale and put everything out into that post-processing. But if you're not getting a good picture, you're not getting a good report at the end. So you just got to be mindful of that. And then obviously processing your software.
I would agree with that. I would agree with Matt. This drawing that you're looking at was actually helping out the DPW. So where Matt is saying, think about what your end product is and what you're going to have to cover, and then will your equipment handle that particular product? And I couldn't agree with you more, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. And then also, just because you shoot 50 images, that doesn't mean you're using all 50 of them. And unfortunately, it takes time to look through each individual image. But with your software, it's going to be automatic, but your quality will increase as you are manually getting in there and saying, yeah, no, this picture isn't good. So of your 50 photographs that you take of a scene, you're probably going to use, let's say, between 40 and 45, because if you get rid of those blurry or over or underexposed pictures, then that's less inaccuracies for your software to try to process. So you're, creating an efficiency and you're creating a higher quality that way too. So if you are playing with any of the softwares, I would recommend getting involved in the manual side of the things too, and you'll be surprised on how accurate your imagery will come in, and if you've got measurements tied in there or scaling of how tighter those numbers will be.
All right, and just a couple more questions that have come through. What's the biggest problems you guys have found with the drones?
I know personally, living in the Northeast, sometimes the weather isn't permitting us to get the drone out at an accident scene. I don't know about Dave or Matt.
I don't think it's really, I won't say a problem. It just requires a lot of pre-planning. Again, it depends upon, if you're active law enforcement and your department's flying underneath the COA and have the 107s, as opposed to an individual that, that's out there as a private entity. And again, because of the restrictions of, flying over human beings and traffic, that it requires a lot of pre-planning. There's a lot of areas that you wouldn't normally think may have some temporary flight restrictions, or there's airports. So it does require, to look in advance to successfully have a mission, and then ensure that your safety to the people around you, and that you're adhering to all their federal rules and regs. that are out there with the FAA, because, nothing worse is you want the FAA to come down and maybe sanction you with a civil citation for some type of violation, or something goes wrong, and again, you find yourself in some type of litigation for, injuries, from your craft. So it just comes down to ensuring that you have a good program, you with your craft, and you're really just a lot of pre-planning.
Right. Hey guys, and Torrin, if you could advance a couple of slides to just let everyone know, most of the people that did sign up for this one webinar most likely signed up for this series, but I did just want to do a plug about some upcoming webinars that we will be hosting as well. This one is called Do's and Don'ts of Mapping. This is just basically two other professionals speaking on just, time and life-saving tips when it comes to just mapping in general. That's going to be airing March 26th. And then we have Diagramming 101 with Ferrozone and IMS 360. We actually have the two guests here of Mike and Matt will be doing that presentation, just opening up the program and just giving you guys some of their tips and tricks that they do to smooth things along. And then again, we did have the poll for your ACTAR, and we certainly do have. We'll stay here some extended periods of time if whoever is interested in asking some more questions. So with that, I do want to ask about. Let's see. Here's another question here. Have you found an incompatibility between photogrammetry software output and diagramming input, as in reality capture having the OBJ or PLY, et cetera, outputs, and then having reveal not like any of those input types? Have you guys experienced any of that?
I primarily use Ferrozone, so no problems for Ferrozone.
Yeah, I'm not too versed in reality capture, but as far as IMS Map 360 and the outputs, we're okay with that. The one thing that I could say as a general rule is you want to have an industry consistent file. Like for example, when you're at the scene using a total station or a robot, you're going to export a DXF or a .txt or an ASCII file, and those are industry standard file extensions. So as long as the file extensions are good, you should have no problem. And if that's the case, then I would definitely get a hold of the tech support of the software you're using, because you shouldn't have any issues.
Yeah, a lot of the newer generation forensic CAD programs out there, because of the industry, of the laser devices with point cloud data, or aerial photographs, are revamping if they have not already. But even if you post-process out some of these photogrammetry programs, the point cloud data, the LAS, I know like Trimble's Reveal, they were able to import an LAS, as were even the old the old CAD Zone version 10 already had a point cloud engine that would allow you to import LAS, some data that came from a scanner. So if you're running with some older CAD programs out there, beyond their older 32-bit systems in your computer, you may find some incompatibilities to actually handle the point cloud data, because it is very memory intensive. And then if you start doing graphics or videos or movement, then it's very video memory intensive. So again, you have to pre-plan. With this new technology, some of your computer systems may not be able to handle the data that you were in past were able to work with. So again, you just need to look into your software requirements that you need of the software, and to help better guide you on your computer, and be able to work with some of the photogrammetry programs and some of the forensic CAD programs that are out there that work in 3D.
Perfect. You guys, there's a couple other comments people are mentioning just about that. The programs, they're suggesting you can use Blender and Cloud Compare. They kind of help with some formatting. Rhino is another good one for changing formats, that sort of thing. There is a question, are there any ways to expedite FAA approvals? Many times our accident reconstruction experts don't get but a few days heads up. So are there any ways to expedite an FAA approval that you guys know of?
This is Dave here. Not that I'm aware of it. I mean, other than, you know, the claim of the land system with some of the apps that they're a part of the FAA program, they're supposed to give you near time, you know, approval. I don't know what the turnaround time is on those.
If you're a government agency, then you're going to want to get a COA. The COA pre-approves those waivers ahead of time. You know, if we get a deployment, we'll actually go on and file a drone NOTAM so that other aircraft know we're there. But we're still operating within the guidelines of our COA. But private sector, you're going to have to go through the normal FAA waiver procedure.
Great, thanks, Gabe. And Tori, if you just go back to that contact page again, and there's also been some other questions about the recording of this, which we do have it recorded. We can even supply the PowerPoint presentation. What we'll be doing is we'll be drafting up a recap of today's presentation and be posting it on Laser Technologies blog. And then we absolutely do a follow-up email for everyone that attended or registered to let you guys know when that is available for download. So again, the entire recording will be available and the actual presentation material. So we'd like to just take this opportunity to thank our guest speakers for today. It did seem like, again, the attendance was extremely high. Obviously, the engagement was high as well with all the questions. So I hope everyone felt this was of value to you. And again, we do appreciate Mike, David, and Matt, you guys, for your times today. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're going to go ahead and conclude today's webinar.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you.